Why do so many people still believe that Europe invented progress, that Western democracy is the universal model, and that capitalism was born from Europe's internal genius rather than from global exploitation? In Eurocentrism, Modernity, Religion and Democracy, Marxist economist Samir Amin tears apart the ideological myth that Europe is the centre of world history. He argues that Eurocentrism is not just prejudice, it's a coherent bourgeois worldview that serves capitalist imperialism by presenting Western history as the only path to modernity. Eurocentrism, Amin writes, is, open quote, not simply ignorance of other cultures, but a full-fledged ideology, an interpretation of the world and its history in terms that glorify European uniqueness and superiority, end quote. This video is a close reading of Eurocentrism, a book that shows how bourgeois thought masks colonial domination as universal truth, how so-called modernity was built on the backs of the colonized, and why socialism must break from this ideological prison to build a genuinely internationalist future. Samir Amin opens with a powerful thesis. Eurocentrism is not a mistake or accidental oversight. It is a structured ideology that interprets global history as a linear path that begins in ancient Greece, passes through Rome, Christianity, the Enlightenment, and culminates in European capitalism and liberal democracy. This creates a narrative where Europe is the subject of history, and all other civilizations are static, backward, or derivative. Amin calls this a teleological interpretation of history. That is, history is seen as progressing towards a predetermined European goal. The term teleological comes from the Greek telos, meaning end or goal, and in this case, the goal is always Western-style capitalism. For Amin, this isn't just academic nonsense. It's a worldview that justifies empire, development aid, war, and global economic dominance by presenting them as a part of, open quote, a civilizing mission, end quote. Eurocentrism works ideologically by hiding power under the mask of reason. He writes, open quote, Eurocentrism transforms historical facts into moral judgments. The West is rational, the rest are religious. The West is scientific, the rest are mystical. The West is democratic, and the rest are despotic, end quote. But all of this, he argues, is historical fiction built to serve the ruling class. One of the most devastating critiques that Amin makes is against the claim that capitalism developed in Europe due to its internal superiority, supposedly due to rational thought, individualism, and a natural break from feudalism. Amin calls this, open quote, endogenous capitalism, end quote, the theory that capitalism came from within Europe alone. But he exposes it as an ideological cover for the real process, the formation of a global system of accumulation rooted in slavery, colonization, and the violent extraction of value from the periphery. He writes, open quote, there is no European miracle. Capitalism was not born in the West through some internal dynamism, but through a world system founded on the plunder of the colonies, end quote. From the 16th century onwards, Europe's rise was inseparable from its conquest of the Americas, the transatlantic slave trade, the exploitation of Asia, and the theft of land and labour across the global south. This is what Marx referred to as primitive accumulation, the violent precondition of capitalist exploitation. Amin's crucial addition is to show that this process is ongoing. The global south still exists, not outside capitalism, but in a dependent position, exploited to sustain the wealth of the core capitalist powers. This is the core of dependency theory, and Amin stands as one of its greatest Marxist defenders. Amin also critiques the idea that Europe represents rationality while the rest of the world is religious, mystical, or fatalistic. This binary, reason versus religion, is a cornerstone of Eurocentrism. But Amin shows that this too is a historical distortion. Europe, he notes, had no monopoly on reason or science. Islamic civilization, for example, preserved and advanced rational knowledge during the European Dark Ages. Chinese, Indian, and African societies also developed complex systems of science, law, and ethics. More importantly, Amin argues that the Enlightenment in Europe did not destroy religion, it replaced it. The worship of a divine God was replaced by the worship of private property, the individual, the market, and the nation state. He calls this the secular metaphysics of bourgeois ideology. He writes, open quote, "Bourgeois ideology appears secular, but it is a new religion, the religion of capital, masked as reason," end quote. This insight is critical for Marxists because it shows how ideology evolves. The capitalist ruling class does not reject metaphysics, it simply creates new ones, grounded in market fetishism, meritocracy, and the Eurocentric ideas of progress. Liberal democracy is often presented as a universal political ideal, but Amin shows that liberal democracy was never universal. It emerged in a specific historical context of class struggle, colonial exploitation, and capitalist domination. In Europe, democratic institutions were built around property rights, excluding women, workers, and colonized people for centuries. In the global south, this democracy is often imposed through IMF conditions, through foreign intervention, and elite-managed elections that preserve dependency. Amin argues that Eurocentrism universalizes a restricted form of bourgeois democracy, while ignoring other traditions of collective governance, solidarity, and communal control. He also rejects the idea that development must follow the European path, from feudalism to capitalism to industrial modernity. This model ignores that most countries were forcibly underdeveloped through colonial rule and are still locked into unequal exchange within global capitalism. He writes, open quote, "The West does not offer a universal model, but a particular trajectory made possible by imperial privilege," end quote. True development, he argues, requires delinking, the strategic withdrawal from subservience to the global capitalist system, and the building of independent socialist paths based on local histories and needs. For Amin, rejecting Eurocentrism is not cultural relativism. It is a materialist critique of ideology. A Marxist must ask who benefits from the story that Europe invented modernity, who profits from the idea that liberal capitalism is the final stage of history. Amin calls for a multipolar world, not just geopolitically, but intellectually and culturally. A world in which many civilizations, many revolutionary paths, and many visions of socialism can emerge, free from the mental shackles of Eurocentric superiority. He writes, open quote, "We must build a new universalism, not one that erases difference, but one rooted in solidarity, equality, and the liberation of all peoples from capitalist domination," end quote. This is not possible within the Eurocentric frame. It requires decolonizing Marxism itself, not abandoning it, but grounding it in a global struggle, not European myth. Samir Amin's Eurocentrism, modernity, religion, and democracy is a necessary weapon for any Marxist trying to think beyond empire, beyond liberal dogma, and beyond the ideological stranglehold of the West. It teaches us that capitalism's dominance is not just military or economic. It's epistemological. It shapes how we see time, history, reason, and democracy. To break that hold, we need more than slogans. We need theoretical clarity and ideological rupture. If socialism is to be truly international, it cannot be built on foundations that were made to justify slavery, empire, and plunder. This has been the Left Library. Like, subscribe, and share if you found this reading useful, and let us know what revolutionary text we should unpack next. Thank you.